From the Aishin Broadcast Studio, it's the Executive Spotlight.
Welcome to the AutoSuccess Executive Spotlight. I'm your host, Brian Ankney. Today our guest is Joy Green from OneView. Welcome, Joy.
Hey, Brian, nice to be here.
Hey, we're really happy you're here, and I want to dive right into some content.
All right.
It seems like dealerships have like a target on their back as far as ransomware attacks and cybercriminals, all these bad guys. They're looking at car dealerships. Like, why are car dealerships seem to be the target these days?
Yeah, well, so cyber attacks and ransomware attacks really kind of become this this kind of rinse and repeat cycle, unfortunately, with automotive dealerships. And really, if you think about it, it's been something that's kind of been building up over the past couple of years. Really, about 5 years ago, if you think about how dealerships were focusing on technology and data security, many dealers just really weren't. It wasn't at the top end of their focus. A lot of these threat agents and ransomware attack, type of cyber attacks, they were really trying to focus on consuming consumer information. So going out and finding, personal information, how could we sell that on a dark web, and targeting those specific dealers and other industries at large. The FTC obviously kind of looked into that and said, hey, this is something that we need to make sure that dealerships are taking seriously, and they made changes to the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. They've changed a lot of the compliance rules, and dealers had to make a lot of those technology changes. And that was all for the better. But the unfortunate reality is now ransomware agents, they have determined that since dealerships are such high transaction volume organizations, they have so much going on in the service department, so much going on in sales, they need access to that data like now, like immediately. And so what they have found is they're an ideal target for ransomware attacks, because typically dealers just want to get moving on with their day. They want to go service cars, they want to sell cars, and they're typically going to pay the ransom and get going. And that becomes kind of that double-edged sword, because now as you see a lot of these dealerships investing in insurance policies that cover ransomware attacks, that can then ultimately cover the ransom itself, once they pay that ransom, the ransomware agents are just going to look at another dealership and say, this is probably the exact same situation. They probably have the same insurance policy. So they go out and they decide to attack that dealership and attack another dealership or attack a software company. And these continue to really impact the automotive industry as a whole. And that's, obviously been a big challenge.
You'd mentioned, how dealerships need access to that data, like right now. I'd like to talk about data disruptions, and I'd like for you to maybe define what that means. But then let's talk about the ways that data can be disrupted that doesn't have to do with bad guys and ransomware and cyber attacks.
Sure. I mean, a data disruption, by definition, is just anything that prevents you from being able to access your data, quickly and readily, right? And so cyber attacks are really the top of mind right now in the industry, because it's happening so frequent, it's happening at scale, and that's something that dealerships should be preventative to and focused on. But really, disruptions can happen across a wide variety of different reasons. A great example of it is natural disasters. Helene and Milton, those impact a wide variety of dealers just because they can't operate their dealership, of course, but also their team's ability to be able to continue to service and access their information. Actually, there was a statistic I saw that FEMA announced that in 2023 there were 114 different natural disasters. And you think, well, there was 114 hurricanes and 114 tornadoes, but a wildfire, an earthquake, a tornado, a windstorm, a snowstorm, tropical storms, all of those can constitute as a natural disaster. And ultimately, those natural disasters, affect the community at large, but really can impact how that dealership operates, on a daily basis. And so when you think about data disruptions, you want to start thinking about what types of systems do you use that can be impacted. If you have data that is a physical phone system at your dealership, and you have the power goes out, or that phone system can't operate for whatever reason because of a natural disaster, maybe the phone lines go down because of an ice storm, how is your consumer, how is your customer going to be able to contact you? How's your team going to be able to call out and continue to work the sales pipeline, or let the customer know that their car is ready to be serviced? Sure, you can use cell phones and things, but that's all kind of a backup triage to the initial problem. Outside of that, natural disasters, the other thing that as dealers really invest in technology, because dealers over the past 5 years have really bought into using technology more since COVID. It helps them scale, a lot of consolidation in, operating centrally but managing centrally but operating regionally. Dealerships invest in this technology, but they may not think that that technology may not be available for them to use for whatever reason. They could be kind of a result of a secondary technology limitation. So for example, Amazon Web Services, AWS as they call it, that services a lot of different technology platforms. If AWS has an outage, that can ultimately then affect your dealership's ability to do something operationally. Maybe it's the credit system that you use is powered by AWS or Amazon Azure services, or Microsoft Azure services. Maybe your desking product or your DMS might be web-based, and it limits your ability to be able to continue to do business. It may be a short period of time, a day or 2 days, but that still can have a major impact on your dealership's operations.
It sounds like the only way to stay safe is a bomb shelter, but it's probably really difficult to sell cars from a bomb shelter.
Yeah, phone service is not great down there.
Yeah, the cell phone isn't going to work either. Yeah,
Yep.
So how can dealerships protect themselves, from data disruptions?
Yeah, it's all about being proactive in how you design that backup plan. Business continuity is not a new topic. Many industries have to focus on what is your business continuity plan. It's kind of a symptom of being so technology forward, because so many dealers have invested in technology. They think, well, this technology is going to help us. Well, the old school way of doing it with a paper form and writing up a physical law contract or all the different forms, that's a great backup plan, but a lot of dealerships have shied away from using those tools because they want to use the technology. Yeah. So your team just has to be prepared to revert to a secondary process. And that's where that business continuity plan comes in. You want to make sure that you have all of those different strategies predefined and outlined, so your team knows that if this system goes down, I know that I can go use this process. That paper form that we know we could use, there's copies of that paper form that exist on this shelf in this location in the F&I office, so that in the event that they are trying to help a customer and they can't access that website because it's a secondary internet outage for the servicer of that technology system, they can go and grab that form. They know where it's at, instead of your team kind of running around with like chickens with their heads cut off. So having that plan outlined ahead of time and really focusing on, if this system were to go down, what is our backup plan and what is our third plan in some cases. That's a really important step that dealerships can be taking to just protect themselves when this disruption happens.
So they need to have a plan defined and in a place where people are aware of it. And I'm guessing, you didn't mention the green Sharpie, but I'm guessing that they need to have a couple of green Sharpies there to draw the four squares to take out to the customers.
Yeah, you're going to go old school there, but it still works. So
yeah, awesome. So we kind of talked about sales there. Let's talk about service. What does a dealership need to have to be prepared to continue their business and service if there's like an interruption of any of those sorts?
Yeah, something that I've heard commonly when talking with our dealers, dealer customers, is one of the challenge they've had if they've had an outage in their service department or across fixed ops is their work in process. It's knowing what is currently in what state at that exact moment. A lot of dealerships have some predefined backup procedures, whether they archive their data at the end of the month, whether they print out a bunch of schedules and have a binder or a run book that they do. A controller has a kind of a month-end recap that they keep. Many dealers have that, but at that exact moment when that disruption happens, which more times than not, a disruption is going to be out of the blue, you're not going to be expecting it.
Yeah.
That work in process is really critical to know what's in your service department, what's in your parts inventory. And so as your team's trying to triage this and just make things work, you can still service the cars. A common thing that we talk about a lot with our dealers when I get in these type of situations is how important a dealership actually is to the community at large. You can't say, well, we can't service your car today, come back tomorrow. Yeah. That's a mom who can't pick her kid up from school or can't go take him to soccer practice. That's a dad who can't drive his truck to work that he needs to. Or, there's some community criticality. If you can't service those cars or you can't grab the right parts because you don't know if that part's in inventory, or make that special order part to facilitate that service, you're going to, unfortunately, disappoint the community at large because you can't help them, and that's going to degrade some of that customer trust. So it may not be, it doesn't sound like it's the most severe thing that, oh, well, this one small system I can't access at this minute or this time. But if you let that stretch on and you don't have a backup plan, that's really going to start degrading what customers perceive of your dealership.
Yeah, well, I mean, every dealer knows how much it costs for them to get a customer to come in the door. And in most dealers, they have a CRM to stay in touch with them. They have a loyalty program. They have all these practices they do for retention. And so you've done all of that work, and then something like this can cause 1, 2, 4. I mean, if you're doing 50 ROs a day and that goes on for 3 days, how many customers did you lose, and what's the expense?
Exactly. The sad reality is, how much does a half a star on a Google review less impact your business from a financial point? And that could be because today you happen to not be able to service somebody's car because you didn't have that backup process in place.
How does that work in F&I? I mean, because you mentioned like the pulling of the credit, and I mean, gosh, I mean, there's a lot of forms in F&I, and I mean, I imagine you could fill them out by hand, but what have you seen work in F&I?
Well, F&I is a challenge, right? Because depending on the state, there's a lot of regulations, and that's why technology is such a powerful tool in F&I and in sales, because you can automate a lot of that process. You take kind of the confusion out of it. The reality is, a lot of those things, unless you have a redundant system that you can cut over to, so a secondary desking product or a secondary technology system that you can use, the paper is typically going to be your backup plan. Mm-hmm. And where that really helps is if you're able to educate your F&I team on why you're filling out certain forms, so that they know that these are the forms that I need to fill out. And as part of that run book, when you have that backup strategy, making sure that you have a deal checklist that's identified that says we need this form and this form and this form. You may not be able to automate a lot of those things, but at least if you have that defined ahead of time, you don't have an F&I manager sprinting in the accounting office, because they forgot a form to be signed and now they're running after the customer who just left with their car.
Yeah.
Presented from the Ishin Broadcast Studio at Babcock's Media.
Joey, we kind of talked about, you were talking about the half star, and I was talking about the expense of getting a customer to become a customer at a dealership. Now, most dealerships are, they have tens of thousands of people that they've spent more than one generation, oftentimes, building this loyal customer base. Like how, let's say, for instance, there is a data disruption where that data is no longer available. Is there a way for a dealership to kind of protect that asset?
Well, backing that data up in some format is your best friend. And it seems kind of a redundant process. You invest in a technology because you trust that technology is going to be there when you're available, when you need it, right? Mm-hmm. And generally it is. And I don't want to doomsday this and say that everybody's technology is going to fail, but the reality of data disruptions is it is not a matter of if, but when, but you just don't know what technology will be disrupted and for how long. Yeah. So when you look into your CRM and customer information, that's something that you really want to be focused on a regular basis to take backups of. And whether that's as simple as downloading, Excel files of the database itself, or working with, third-party technology products that are able to back that data up and archive that on a monthly basis, that's going to help you have something to go back to. Mm-hmm. A common disruption that we didn't talk about as well is not necessarily a data disruption, but it's if you sell your business or you cut ties with a particular vendor, you've decided to move elsewhere, you want to ensure that you have all of the necessary data points backed up and available to you before you make that transition or you stop using that vendor. If you feel that all of the data points from system A are going to be available in system B, you may be missing certain things in certain context. That could be a texting product, that could be a CRM system, it could be just a phone system and seeing what phone calls were made and to whom. Those backups are really critical for you to consider when you make any sort of transition.
While we're talking about transitions, let's go to the biggest one. When a dealership changes their DMS, that's changing everything. You're changing every process, and there's a lot of data there.
Yep.
What can a dealership do to prepare to change DMSs?
Well, time is your biggest ally. with any sort of DMS switch because you are pulling your heart out, right? And you're putting a new heart in. It's a heart transplant, and it's going to cause reverberations across your entire dealership. And that's okay, as long as you're prepared for it and you've planned for it. Dealers need to look at what system are they going from. If they're changing their DMS, they want to look at, okay, we're currently on this system and we're going to move to a new DMS. First and foremost, you're going to focus on the key functionalities. And typically that's going to be derived from, what are you frustrated with? And then you're going to look to see what system does that better, right? And that's all good part of the process when you're procuring a new DMS. But really what you also want to focus on, and that's why time is such an important ally here, is that you want to look at all of the varying other systems. Again, we've been so technology focused as an industry over the past 5 years in investing in technologies that are bolt-ons or part of the DMS and also outside of the DMS. And whatever's working for your dealership, you want to ensure that the new system that you're investing in is going to be able to work and connect and integrate with those varying systems. So really, you have to look at your entire dealership and your technology landscape in a holistic way and say, what are all of the different components that we have currently, and does it work with this new DMS? If not, do we have an alternative solution for it? Things like payroll systems, again, phone systems, your CRM. Sometimes the DMS you're investing into and going to may have those, and then others, they may not. But the other thing that I also see a lot of when working with our dealers who are making these transitions is they sometimes will kind of step over a quarter to pick up a penny. They're going to leave one particular system because maybe that DMS said that they have a bolt-on that's all part of the same environment. And instead of saying, well, this system works really well for us, our team is well trained on it, well educated on it, we've been using it, it's got all these data points that we're familiar with, they say, oh, well, we'll just drop that system and assume that it's an apples to apples, when in reality, your time and experience on that product is more of an apples to orange comparison. So not only look at what the technology scope of that system is and take the time to chat with your managers, chat with your team, and ensure you understand why that product works or what's missing, but really look at how is your team using the solution, and is it a solution that you want to get rid of, you need to get rid of, kind of do that want to have, like to have, shouldn't have anymore, and evaluate that systematically from each one of the systems you have.
Interesting. The DMS you made that's a great analogy. It is like a heart transplant. It touches every aspect of the dealership, and I hadn't thought about it before, but there are a lot of bolt-on products. Depending on what almost every DMS out there has other products that they also offer. And so you're not just changing the heart, you're changing the heart and the kidneys and the lungs and the stomach. It could be every aspect of the dealership.
Yeah, it's an outdated reference, but you're turning into a $6 million man at that point. So.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. So, you just want to be prepared to understand. I think dealers were kind of on a conquest to consolidate, right? And that's something that we've seen a lot in the technology space is, well, if the DMS has it, we should probably use it, kind of try to consolidate as much as we can. Well, when we talk about data disruptions, that's something that you also have to be conscious of, because again, when you put everything in one basket, you open yourself up to, if that core system has challenges, or maybe a secondary component of that core system has challenges. Maybe it's a data services component or an important arm of that tool. If that's being impacted, you may ultimately then be impacted in a lot more ways than you would hope. So sometimes choosing a technology product that's outside of that infrastructure, if it works well for your team, if it meets your expectations, is something that you should always take in consideration as well. There are advantages to being all in one place, but there's also advantages at finding the right tool that fits your business the best.
Well, Joey, is there anything more you'd like to share with our audience today?
Yeah, so data disruptions, as I said before, it's a matter, not a matter of if, but when. It may be a severe impact, it may be a mild impact, it may affect your one particular system for a day. It could be longer than that. It could affect your dealership directly or secondary, through an IT partner. It could be completely out of your control, like a natural disaster.
Yeah.
All of those different disruptions are something that you really need to be prepared for. And so dealers, as they look to, try to continue to improve their internal processes, having a business redundancy and a business continuity plan that when some disruption happens, it's just something that you really need to start focusing on that's going to help your dealer be more successful and continue to operate in those challenges. It's not within the general normal scope of what dealerships are focusing on. They want to service cars. They want to sell cars to consumers. They want to make their communities continue to operate effectively. But if you're not focused on what your business continuity plan is, you're not going to be able to do any of those other three things really well. So again, taking the time and energy to focus on, do we have the right things backed up? Are we doing the right things to ensure that our team's prepared when something happens? It's going to make a dealership just that much more successful.
Great. Well, it's a much better plan than a bomb shelter, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, Joey, thank you for coming in today.
Hey, appreciate the time. Yeah, it's been great.
It's been a pleasure. And thank you for taking the time to join us for this AutoSuccess Executive Spotlight. Today our guest has been Joey Green from OneView. We hope to see you again on a future episode. This one's Over the Curb and Burning Gas.